This is PTV World. I am Syed Shabahat Ali and you're watching Faultlines. The Afghan peace process is stalled once again. Taliban are still in control of almost everything. The government of Afghanistan is losing grounds and losing popularity. United States has tried various steps to bring peace in the region, but unfortunately, they have not met any success in any dimension. Shah Mahmood Qureshi, the foreign minister of Pakistan, has categorically said that even though Pakistan is trying to do its best, but yet will not take any responsibility for failure of the peace process. So where Afghanistan is leading towards? Is it moving toward an ultimate chaos? Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before we bring our first guest to the program.
Although there is still some hope for peace in Afghanistan, generally the prospects of reconciliation and a political solution between the warring parties inside Afghanistan seem to be fading away. Concerns are also growing that Afghanistan is heading towards unprecedented chaos. Seeing no prospect of reconciliation and peace, there have been reports that all warring groups inside Afghanistan are stockpiling weapons. In this uncertain and fragile security environment, the Afghan elite class is searching for a safe abode in the UAE, Pakistan, and other countries. The United States signed the Doha Agreement against the wishes of the Afghan government, in which it accepted Taliban's demand for foreign troop withdrawal, but failed to force the Taliban on a ceasefire. Under the agreement, the US twisted the Afghan government's arms into releasing 5,000 Taliban prisoners, but in return got nothing except the willingness of the Taliban to start negotiations with the Afghan government. There was no explanation on what would happen if the intra-Afghan negotiation failed. As a result, the Afghan government has lost its credibility while the Taliban's morale has skyrocketed. The agreement seems to have paved the way for the world to see Taliban as the main stakeholders and the future rulers of Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the US is demanding Pakistan to do more in relation to Taliban and apply pressure on them, despite knowing that the Taliban isn't ready to accept any demand. The foreign minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said that Pakistan will not take any responsibility if it is blamed for any deterioration in the Afghan peace process. While addressing the inaugural session of the Pak-Afghan bilateral dialogue in Islamabad, Qureshi said, "It is a shared responsibility and nobody is going to buy it anymore that if things go wrong, Pakistan is responsible. We will not take responsibility." He added that Pakistan is honest and sincere in building a peace process in Afghanistan. Will the Taliban rise to power again and a new and deadlier civil war erupt? How will the US respond and react to the emerging trends? And more importantly, how is Pakistan going to be affected?
My first guest in program is former advisor to Afghan President, Mr. Torek Farhadi, joining us from Geneva. Torek, welcome to the program. Torek, we are hearing this disturbing news of Taliban making grounds, taking more districts of Afghanistan. Can you tell us how much land holding is now in Afghanistan with Taliban and how big are these districts that they are taking? What we are trying to understand is, have Taliban started marching ahead and gaining grounds, or is it still a stalemate?
Well, Afghanistan is entering a very unknown future right now. Taliban are gaining ground. They are gaining in districts outside of the large cities. This doesn't mean that when they arrive in the large cities, they will be successful. So we might get into a situation of stalemate for a few months at least. If Taliban approach the larger cities, there is unfortunately the possibility for more bloodshed because there will be resistance to defend the cities. The best solution is a peaceful solution.
Tariq, you have remained a part of administration in Afghanistan. We need to understand something. How is the morale of the Afghan army? And I'm asking you in the context that the Taliban factions are primarily fighting for their religious belief or what they call Islamic Caliphate. There are other sides that are fighting for their ethnic blocs. But How about this Afghan military that has been raised by the current administration? How high would be their morale in absence of any air cover that they do not have so far?
Well, let me clarify. I have not been in the Afghan administration for the past 18 years. I worked abroad, but I look closely what's going on in Afghanistan. For now, each side is fighting for their ideals. The Taliban is fighting for pushing out the foreign troops, and the Afghan side is fighting for the flag and the republic. But as time goes, if violence goes up, nothing guarantees that people will stand up with the Taliban or vice versa. Really, people will judge who is responsible for most of the violence in the country. And if I would say that the branding issue of who is best, who is bad, can change over time as violence continues.
Tariq, how about other factions in Afghanistan that are not on Taliban's side? We understand that there are various warring sides in there. Are they all integrated? Are they all united? Are they all buying the administration of Ashraf Ghani? Admit him to be the figurehead of the government once the United States military is not there to fight any further? Or are there differences between these clans too?
Well, the biggest danger in Afghanistan right now is Daesh or ISIS. A number of attacks in Kabul and in some other cities, and against our Shiite population, our Hazara population, has been claimed by Daesh. So this is a problem that we have to address. In Kabul, the government has fallen short of controlling Daesh. Taliban, the US is saying, will fight against Daesh. So, in that sense, if there was a peace negotiation with good results, the government and Taliban could fight against Daesh. This is the biggest risk for Afghanistan, that we are fighting Daesh, a group that is sort of loosely organized and with no good intentions towards anybody, frankly, even towards Pakistan. What goes on in Afghanistan right now will cross the borders, because if it's an ideological fight, uh, ideological fights do cross borders.
Did I lose you in the middle?
Can you still hear me?
Yeah. Now, please carry on. You said if it is an ideological fight.
If it is an ideological fight, there is risk even for Pakistan, because the ideology of extremism and not giving value to human life in a fight is a very dangerous, devastating ideology, and it doesn't know any borders. So I think we are facing extremism in a way that in South Asia, but especially in Afghanistan and Pakistan, this could be an enemy of the people.
Tariq, but instead of, as you said, Pakistan has a critical role and Pakistan is an important part of this entire picture. But instead of, developing a good relationship with Pakistan or engaging Pakistan in a positive manner, there have been use of foul language. There have been use of bad words and openly opposing Pakistan on all fronts. With a government that is fast losing its support, home and abroad, how logical or rational is that attitude?
Look, the use of foul language against a nation of 220 million people is just regrettable. It shows that those people who have used this language are really immature for the responsibility that they have right now. Afghanistan and Pakistan have to negotiate everything um, in a mature way, without emotions. Yes, there are problems. But if the Afghan government has problems with Pakistan, it can address them to the United Nations. The ambassadors of the Afghan government at the United Nations haven't said anything recently, haven't complained about Pakistan. If they do have complaints, they should. That's where international complaints go. But the use of foul language, uh, this does not represent the nature of the Afghan character, should not have been used, and I regret it has been used this way. Uh, People of Pakistan and people of Afghanistan have um, blood links that go back to centuries. We have lived together. Yes, there is a border in between now, but our culture, our religion is the same, and no one from Afghanistan should speak
Thank
in
you,
an
Tariq, for bringing
irrational
that
manner.
out. Now, how is the relationship between all the oppositions of Taliban? It's very important for us to understand, because eventually, when Taliban are going to try to expand their influence or their control, there are going to be resistance from multiple sides. So, how integrated are these multiple sides with each other, or are all of them are in independent silos?
Well, the Taliban, if they hold territory in the future, then we will have to see how they govern. Are they able to administer the country? Are they able to govern? Or are they able to be different than 25 years ago? From 1996 to 2001, um, uh, Taliban were in government, but the country was very poor. Women were not working. There was violence. Um, this cannot return to Afghanistan. People will not accept it. It's not a matter of foreign forces or foreign countries. The people of Afghanistan will stand up to this. So we don't know how it will pan out. On the Kabul side, there is the government, there's the national army, but Afghanistan has had warlords, has had people who have become extremely rich, and they have the potential to arm people and form militias as well. And so the potential for violence in Afghanistan is big. And if there is a lot of violence, there will be movement of people, civilians, refugees, including refugees coming back to Pakistan.
Thank you very much, Tariq, again for being in my program. It's always a privilege to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, now I have my second guest in program, Major General retired Inam Haq, a very well-read author and defense analyst. We're going to speak to him, but after the break. Welcome back, and as I said earlier, I have with me Major General retired Inam Haq, who is a famous defense analyst and a very well-read author of on these issues. He writes very frequently. General Sahab, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Shadab. Thank you.
General Saab, there is a deadlock on Afghan constitution and a stalemate on this deadlock. It's not going anywhere. Afghan government is not showing flexibility despite not having any other option. Taliban are not coming on table despite best efforts made by Pakistan. How do you see that?
Well, thank you very much. It's a very important development which is in our region, and it directly affects Pakistan. As far as Taliban are concerned, they have stuck to the agreement that they signed with the U.S. on 29th of February last year. There has been no violation from their side. One of the most important clause of that constitution was the release of up to 5,000 prisoners held by the Ashraf Ghani government in Afghan jails. And the Ghani government has deterred on that release program, and that has actually poisoned the atmosphere, because that release was to lead towards the intra-Afghan dialogue under Norwegian supervision, and that hasn't happened. So one thing led to another, and then there's the chain vicious cycle which has happened thereafter. There is an environment of mistrust between the Afghan government and the Taliban, and Pakistan is trying its best to clear the fog amongst the two parties as best as Pakistan can. And there has been some development, some good development very recently. There was an interview of the spokesperson of the Afghan Mujahideen, Syed Shabahat Ali, recently with a Pakistani media outlet, in which he has said that they were committed to finding a peaceful solution to the Afghan problem, their country's problems, in alliance with the U.S., NATO, and Pakistan. And that is probably going to contribute towards the a peaceful solution of this situation. Let's keep the figure crossed. There are a couple forums which are undertaking right now. There is an Istanbul conference which Taliban have refused. There have been up to 3 conferences on Afghanistan with Russia in the lead. China is trying its best. So let's hope something positive will come out of the situation.
General Saab, in this entire equation, there is a recent development which is very surprising. Turkey offering its role in protecting the airport. Now, this is where United States Army and NATO forces, that's what they have been doing for a while. And Turkey, that's not even a neighboring country, is trying to get into this equation. Help us to understand where Turkey is coming from and what are the gains for Turkey in offering its shoulder for such a difficult task.
Yeah, we have to understand the Turkish geostrategic outlook under the new U.S. administration. Turkish relationship with the United States was strained because of the erratic behavior of President Trump and the Turkey buying the S-400 systems from Russia. Being a NATO ally, NATO country, then U.S. thought that Turkey should not go break ranks with the NATO countries and buy a very sophisticated air defense system from Russia. From the Turkish side, President Erdogan was trying to pressurize the NATO and U.S. Forces and the alliance as a whole to give it some space for maneuver. There was a lot of criticism of Turkish human rights and Erdogan's handling of the situation domestically in the mainly in the Western press. So I personally feel that President Erdogan is now trying to seize this opportunity of having good relation with the U.S. Turkey at present has something about 500 troops inside Afghanistan, which after the partial withdrawal of the U.S. and NATO forces is the largest contingent inside Afghanistan. And that is why they have offered to protect the Kabul airport, the Bagram Air Base, because that base is very important for the Western countries inside Afghanistan after the September pullout. In case if the situation deteriorates, this is the only outlet that they can use to get out of the country. So Turkey has offered to protect this base for the reasons that I just outlined. And they are reportedly negotiating with the U.S. side about certain monetary benefits that the U.S. and NATO should offer Turkey.
John Sahab, you recently, John Sahab, wrote about the nexus between Ahmad Massoud and France and Germany's agencies that are trying to use him. Uh, Ponder more light on that. This is very important development.
Uh, the worry that the CIA and the Pentagon had after the pullout was that they won't have any eyes and ears, as they say in the intelligence parlance, inside Afghanistan. So to have the eyes and ears, they were trying to look for certain people and certain warlords who could actually do their bidding after the U.S. and the NATO forces leave Afghanistan and provide them intelligence, ground intelligence mainly, because technical intelligence is not a problem. It was basically the ground intelligence, the eyes and ears on the ground, which is more important for the U.S. and NATO forces. His father, Ahmad Shah Massoud, was also cultivated by the Western countries, and he was acting as their eyes and ears. So, drawing on from that parallel, they tried to cultivate his scientist-educated son, Ahmad Massoud, who is 32 years old, to act as their eyes and ears. And there has been some mulling on between the between the UK intelligence community, the German intelligence community, and the French intelligence community, and they are moving over getting him on towards his side. So that is the development as far as Ahmad Shah Massoud is
And General Sahib, you know, the use of foul language and this poisonous rhetoric against Pakistan is not diluting despite all the efforts that Pakistan is trying to do to stabilize this Afghan government. Do you think this is the Indian support to the sitting administration in Afghanistan which is responsible for culminating this entire narrative against Pakistan? Do you think this is the reason, or are there other reasons behind the scene?
If we see the Afghan situation historically, once the Russians withdrew from Afghanistan, Najibullah government was relying very heavily on the Indian side for support. Till the time Indian government ditched the Najibullah government, and then he was hanged publicly in Kabul. As far as these guys are concerned, I call them the Ashraf Ghani and his cabal, Mohib and Amrullah Saleh and all these people. They are firmly into alliance with the Indian intelligence agencies, and they would do everything in their power to poison the relationship between Pakistan and the future of one political dispensation. They have been at the forefront of spoiling the Doha Peace Accord also. So I don't feel we should expect any good from these guys. And I feel from Pakistan point of view, the best response is to just ignore these people.
Ignoring is very pertinent, but recently Shah Mahmood Qureshi has also given a major statement, and he said Pakistan is going to do all the best that it can do to convince Taliban toward a peace deal, but still will not take any responsibility if Taliban do not agree with it, which actually shows that there is a bit of disappointment in negotiations with Taliban. How do you comment on that?
Well, I've written extensively on this. Taliban are nobody's men. They are their own men. We must understand that. They will do whatever is in their interest, whatever is better for their future inside Afghanistan. And they are, if I may use the term, they're not Pakistan's henchmen. So that is the first thing we need to understand. Taliban and Afghan have a very open and a very independent mind. If you do them favor, they will try to return the favor, but that is it. They would not be thankful to you forever. That is an expectation in the South Asian anthropology, if I may. So we must understand that Taliban understand the situation. They read the situation very correctly. As far as Pakistan is concerned, I have written on this. We must not unnecessarily force them towards a negotiation with the U.S. and the Afghan government on international terms. Internationally, they are being nudged, they are being forced towards inclusivity, upholding the constitution, protecting the minority and the women rights, and all that, those other things. I think those are issues which are subsidiary to the main issue inside Afghanistan, and that is protection of life and property and restoration of peace inside Afghanistan. And Taliban are the major stakeholder in this entire game, and we must negotiate with the winning side, not with the losing side, the Ashrafani and Cabal, to my understanding.
Thank you very much, General Saab. Thank you very much for being here in the program, ladies and gentlemen. We'll take a break and we'll join back with the third segment of the program. Stay with us. Welcome back. Ladies and gentlemen, while many in the media industry are talking about the prospects of peace in Afghanistan, we often hear views from people who have already contributed a lot to the society or already have achieved a lot in their lifetime. But the voices of Afghan youth and Afghan women remain missing from the entire media landscape. And this is why we have invited in our program Miss Aisha Khurram. She's only 21 years old, youth representative of Afghanistan in the United Nations in 2019, a brave and courageous voice of Afghan woman. And I welcome you to my program, Aisha. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much, Ali. Thank you for having me today.
Aisha, we are discussing this Afghan peace process. There are concerns everywhere, including Pakistan. How do you see this peace process developing while being there in Afghanistan, while being a young lady, educated, and eyeing for your future in this country?
Well, the prospect of peace right now, it seems much grimmer than before. We have right now a formal negotiation that is in stalemate in Doha, and it is coupled with an increased level of violence on the ground. And it followed the President Biden's unconditional decision of a calendar-based withdrawal of US troops. And it actually emboldened Taliban. And right now, there is a win-lose mentality clouding the peace process. And that's why the increased level of violence is used as a leverage by the warring parties. And that's how they would want to get most out of the peace negotiations in Doha. And at this moment in time, when we had the deal of Taliban in the United States, we were expecting this deal to lead somewhere, to promise us the sustainable peace and stability for Afghanistan. And it promised a concrete result of peace process. And then we expected to see the US and NATO withdraw from our country. And right now, we all are wondering what was the reason of all this. When United States is withdrawing with no result from the Afghan peace process, and still the future of Afghan people, the future of this nation, and the future of peace process is undefined, unresolved. And it seems that now the peace process, it's not about peace process itself, it's about power sharing arrangements. And that's why we have violence in both peace negotiations. Other than that, a real and normal peace process will not see increased level of violence on the ground and continued negotiations abroad the country.
Aisha, the voices of Afghan women has remained either missing from this entire scenario or have not been in the mainstream of attention of media. So are there any efforts being made to bring the concerns of women, which must be a lot because the Western media is writing a lot about it. Are there any efforts being made to bring the voices of women in the forefront of this entire process?
Of course. There has been efforts by Afghan women for Afghan women. But the thing is, Afghan women, they have legitimate concerns and fear at this time. Their presence in the society was diminished, and everything that we have experienced from 1995 really scared people, a lot of women, of what is to come after the peace deal with Taliban. And for that, they are trying to fight for their rights, the rights that are very much basic, that are required for a dignified life of each individual on this planet, yet we are fighting for it. Whenever we have the opportunity and the platform to speak up and ask for it. Of course, women right now, they're concerned, but we have strong women representing Afghan women at the negotiating table, which we expect to to bring results to and promise a dignified future for the women of Afghanistan. But the thing that concerns us the most is the vagueness and the ambiguity in the language of negotiation, especially on Taliban side. They are claiming that they will allow and they will grant Afghan women's rights in the frame of Sharia law. And now it's undefined, it's very ambiguous, and it's not clear. And if we leave loopholes in the peace agreement, if we leave ambiguity, it might result into some of the horrible things we have experienced years ago. And that's what Afghan women are so afraid of, and that's why they are pushing forward for change. They are trying to remind the negotiating parties that this peace is not just about power sharing, it's also about the future of the Afghanistan's younger generation. It's the future of Afghan women who have had like the relative progress and achievements in the last 20 years. They had the breathing space, and the society after 2001 accommodated women in different sectors. Of course, we are nowhere near gender equality, but the relative success that we had, it should not be diminished, and it's worth fighting for. It's worth to be protected, defended, and preserved.
Aisha, the dividend of this democratic peace that you have spoken about for the women in Afghanistan, have it trickled down to the grassroots level in the area where Afghan government has its own writ? Or has it just stayed in a top circle of society, in the elites, and while the remaining factions of society, there has been no changes in the life of the woman? How do you see that?
Yes, of course. What we are seeing right now is just peace negotiations between the warring parties. And it is mostly focused on their interests, the interest of the parties involved, the interest of the Taliban, and the interest of some of the foreign stakeholders involved. But what is missing at the moment is the peace process on the ground, the process of restoration, reconstructions, healing, and reconciliation. This is the most important thing, and this process needs much more work than a mere negotiation between the negotiating parties. Of course, negotiation is the first step, but what is needed on the ground is to prepare the mindset, the mentality, in order for the people to feel the ownership, the responsibility, and to accept any new Afghanistan that might emerge from the peace deal between the warring parties. And for that, the real work is still left undone. And we can take the example of Colombia peace process. It was successful between the negotiating parties. They have signed the deal. It was successful, but at the end of the day, in referendum, it was rejected by the people because on the ground, people were not mentally ready to absorb that new era of their own country. And it is the same case for Afghanistan. And right now, we cannot have this process of reconciliation to reach out to the people who are living in the most damaged areas of the country, who are living under Taliban's control. We cannot start this process of reconciliation with increased level of violence. And for that, we need ceasefire as a precondition, which we do not have right now.
Aisha, what I understand from your conversation is that there is a lot of skepticism and a lot of fear in the atmosphere of Afghanistan these days, particularly for women and children and other communities that are actually not as strong as the warring sides.
Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, I said what I understand from your conversation is that there is a lot of fear for women and children in Afghanistan at the moment when this peace process is not leading to anywhere.
Yes, there is the fear, but what the civil society is trying to do is to push for change because we do not want this opportunity to be a missed one, because this is a lifetime opportunity, and after 4 decades of war, we are eventually in a place where regional countries, where superpowers, where Afghan people themselves are so much ready, so much craving for a break, not a simple break that is short term, but a long term break for a lifetime of this war. But what we are afraid of is the fact that we do not want this process or any peace deal to be based on fear, ignorance, or fantasy. We want it to be realistic. We want it to be real and not something that will promise a temporary break, but also cultivate um, um, unpredictability, uncertainty for the future of Afghanistan's younger generation, because we cannot afford to live in fear and decide in fear and leave so much ambiguity, so much disaster for generations to come.
Aisha, as an educated youth in Afghanistan, what are your personal views about the state-to-state engagement between Afghanistan and Pakistan at the moment? The situation we understand is not very ideal, but how do you see the development between these two nations?
Well, Pakistan played a very important role in the Afghan war from since the war started in Afghanistan 4 decades ago. And still, we can see that Pakistan is playing a significant role in the Afghan peace process. And right now, for peace to be sustainable, for peace to be long lasting and genuine, we need the commitment and political will of our neighboring country, of regional countries, to join hands and work for sustainable peace in Afghanistan. And Pakistan at this moment, there is a huge potential of both countries to work on areas of cooperation. And any future peace deal will also promise sustainable peace for the region and for Pakistan as well. And for that, I believe we have to consider the peace in Afghanistan, the war in Afghanistan, closely bound to the future of our neighboring countries, to the future of region. So for that, the younger generation of both countries, both nations, they have the potential to change the narrative and to draw both nations closer than ever before, because that's what we expect the peace process to do for the future of this region. Because the peace in the region, it will not be despite Afghanistan, it will be for Afghanistan. We all know that. And for that to happen, we need all countries involved as parties in this peace process to be genuine in their efforts for bringing a sustainable peace, and also to be open for any areas of cooperation that we might have.
Thank you very much, Aisha, for being guest in my program. Ladies and gentlemen, we see Afghanistan in middle of nowhere now. The government has not been able to pull Afghanistan out of this chaos and state of crisis. And if the situation does not improve, Afghanistan, God forbid, can once again go toward another era of war. We'll speak once again next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.